Hello everyone and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. I'm not the kind of person who usually posts on forums or shares strange things. But what happened to me in 2022 still keeps circling in my head. Back then, I lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in Tacoma, Washington. I had just gotten out of a pretty complicated relationship. My remote work contract had ended, and my sleep schedule was completely ruined. I spent most nights browsing threads on forgotten forums, those corners of the internet that felt like digital graveyards, old posts, broken links, users inactive for years. Somehow, that gave me a kind of comfort, like I was surrounded by people just as lost as I was. That night started like any other. It was almost 2:30 in the morning. I was lying in bed with my laptop on my chest, scrolling through a thread titled "Things You Shouldn't See." Most of the links led nowhere or showed blurry videos that clearly looked staged. But there was one comment that caught my attention, not because of what it said, but because of what it showed. A countdown timer. Just a black box with white numbers ticking down. 127. It had no title, no description, nothing. Just a user who had replied, "Watch it until the end if you have the guts." I hesitated for a few seconds. Curiosity won. When the counter hit 0, the screen filled with static for a few seconds before fading into a live broadcast. It was definitely not a pre-recorded video, because I could see the chat updating in real time. The image showed what looked like a dimly lit warehouse or garage. The fluorescent lights flickered, and the camera was fixed, pointed at a person sitting in a metal chair. Their hands were tied behind their back, duct tape over their mouth, and their head tilted forward as if they were unconscious or sedated. The chat exploded with activity, hundreds of users typing, commenting things like, "A new one," "Looks weak, won't last 10 minutes." At first, I thought it was some kind of online role play or a twisted joke, but there was something about it that felt too real. The lighting, the faint breathing sounds the microphone picked up, the small movement of that person's fingers. Nothing looked acted. Then a line of text appeared at the top of the screen. "Place your bet. How long do you think they'll last?" People started typing numbers. 10 minutes. 20. Some said less than 5. Others joked that they'd seen worse. The camera shifted slightly, as if someone behind it was adjusting it. It turned a few centimeters to the right, revealing a metal shelf with tools, and right next to it, there was a dust-covered mirror. The reflected image in that mirror made my blood run cold. For just 1 or 2 seconds, but I saw it with perfect clarity. My room, my desk, my lamp, my bed, exactly how they were that night. I froze. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I blinked several times and rewound the video trying to see that moment again. But the reflection was gone. The camera had refocused on the person in the chair. I felt my heart pounding. That panic sensation that hits you when you realize you left the front door unlocked all night. I sat up abruptly, looking around, convinced that in any corner I would find the lens of a hidden camera, or maybe a strange reflection between the air vents. But there was nothing. Everything looked normal. Even so, the fear was real. I grabbed the laptop and turned it toward the wall, as if that could protect me from something. I typed in the chat, asking what the hell that had been, if anyone else had noticed the reflection. My comment was instantly swallowed. The chat was moving too fast, full of mocking messages. bets, and emojis. No one replied. It was as if no one else had seen it, or worse, as if they were already used to seeing it. The person in the chair began to move. They were awake now. They slowly lifted their head, eyes wide open. They looked young, maybe a teenager or someone in their early 20s. Their breathing was ragged, and they were trembling in a way that was unbearable to watch, as if they were trying to stay silent or not draw attention from whatever was off camera. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the tab shut, turned off the laptop, and literally unplugged the router. I know it sounds exaggerated, but in that moment it felt like the broadcast was watching me more than I was watching it. I spent the rest of the night awake, pacing back and forth through the apartment, checking behind furniture, inside closets. At one point, I grabbed a kitchen knife and held it the whole time, just in case. Nothing happened. No noise, no knock, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had seen me, and not only that it had recognized me. The next day I talked to my friend Eli, the only person I still kept regular contact with. He's a programmer, a very rational guy, the type who doesn't believe in anything he can't prove with code. I told him everything I'd seen, expecting him to laugh or think I was imagining things, but he didn't. He stayed quiet for a while and then asked me to send him the link. I sent him a screenshot of the countdown page right before the broadcast activated. A couple of hours later, he wrote back, "That page no longer exists. The domain is gone. There's no DNS record, no archived version." He explained that it looked like a temporary domain, created to self-destruct after fulfilling its purpose. And then he sent me another message that made my blood run cold. "Bro, look closely at the screenshot. There's something in the corner of your window." I opened the image and zoomed in. I almost dropped my phone. In the corner of the window in my room, barely visible between the half-closed blinds, there was a human silhouette. You couldn't see details, but you could make out the outline of a face, nose, mouth, eyes, looking inward. I hadn't noticed it when I took the screenshot. I ran to the window and yanked the blinds up. Nothing, just the alley behind the building, as empty as always. I live on the 3rd floor, with no balcony and no fire escape. There was no way someone could have been there, but that shape was unmistakable, and I couldn't erase it from my mind. That night I didn't sleep either. I left all the lights on, even the bathroom and the kitchen. I tried calling Eli several times, but he didn't answer. The streaming page had disappeared completely. Every attempt to go back led to an error, as if it had never existed. I checked the forum through my browser history, searched for the thread, the username of the person who posted the link. Nothing. There was no trace left, not in cache, not in archived copies. It was as if they had erased everything with surgical precision. And yet, I had the proof, the screenshot of the counter, the mirror reflection, the silhouette in the window. My room reflected on that screen. A few days later, the last thing happened, the thing that left me with a feeling I've never been able to shake. I was cleaning out my inbox when I noticed something strange. An email draft I didn't remember writing. It had no subject, just a few lines. "I saw you watching. You made your decision. Don't pretend you didn't." It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was just saved in the drafts folder. I hadn't sent it. I didn't even remember opening a new message that day. I deleted it immediately. But ever since then, I check my drafts every few days, like I'm expecting to find another message like it. None has ever appeared again. Still, that feeling remains, because that text, that tone, was personal, as if someone knew me. Over time, I decided to move. I bought a new laptop, signed up with a different internet provider, and changed my phone number. More than a year has passed and nothing out of the ordinary has happened again. No timer, no face in the window. But since then, I never leave the blinds open at night. I can't. And I haven't watched a live broadcast again. I know how all of this sounds. I know it seems like I lost my mind for a while. But I swear, I know what I saw. It was my room, my reflection in that mirror. So if someone ever sends you a link with a countdown and no title, don't open it. Please, listen to me, for your own good. Story 2. At the end of 2021, I was working full-time as a freelance graphic designer. Most of my gigs were small visual identity projects and video editing for startups that usually didn't survive more than a few months. I lived alone in a tiny second-floor studio in Tucson, Arizona. It was just my cat Felix, my overloaded laptop, and me. Work had started to dry up, and my savings were running out faster than I had calculated. I'm not proud to admit it, but I started exploring darker job boards, corners of the internet where the offers were anonymous, shady, but sometimes well paid, especially if you didn't ask too many questions. One night I came across a post on a forum called Iron Packet. The ad was vague, but it offered $700 for a simple job: anonymized video footage. I wrote to the contact. The user called themselves Midnight Sync. They responded almost immediately, sending me a Dropbox link with the files. The instructions were precise. I had to blur faces from 5 different camera angles, keep the timestamps, and re-render everything in black and white, using a specific codec they also told me. I didn't ask questions. I'd done similar work before, sometimes for independent filmmakers, other times for private investigators. Only this time, something felt colder, more impersonal. But I needed the money. The footage was strange. The recordings looked like they came from security cameras installed in a rundown motel at night. 3 people appeared on screen. 2 were dragging what looked like a body wrapped in a carpet, while a third, next to a beat-up gray Dodge Charger, kept watch, constantly looking over their shoulder. There was no sound, no color, just grainy black and white video and a time counter flickering in the bottom right corner. I hesitated for a moment, but I convinced myself it had to be a prank video, a dramatization, or something staged for the internet. I'd seen worse on Reddit, so I did the job. I blurred the faces, cleaned up the image, exported, compressed the file, and sent it back. An hour later, I got the payment notification, but along with the usual confirmation message, Midnight Sync sent another text. "Thanks. Your hands just cleaned up a murder." I stared at the screen, frozen, with my hand hovering over the mouse, like my brain needed to reboot. I even let out a nervous laugh, the kind where your stomach drops, but your body still doesn't understand. I replied with only a question mark, but there was no response. The account disappeared minutes later. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours replaying the video in my head, looking for something I might have missed. The way the carpet folded under the weight, the dark stain spreading across the asphalt, the fact that none of the 3 ever looked at the cameras, as if they knew exactly where they were positioned. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and reviewed the files frame by frame again. Nothing new, but I had that metallic taste in my mouth, that icy feeling in my chest. Deep down, I knew that message wasn't a joke. The next morning, I turned on the TV while making coffee, just to have some background noise. I wasn't paying attention until I heard the name of a place that made me drop the mug. Sycamore Pines Motor Lodge. The mug crashed to the floor, but I didn't even care. On the screen was the exact same video I had edited the night before. Same parking lot, same time, same movements. But this time, the footage was slightly different. The faces were still blurred, though not with my filter. Someone else had made their own version. The news was talking about a possible homicide linked to organized crime. No suspects identified. The public was being asked to help. I stood there paralyzed, hands shaking, and then I saw it. A tiny detail, but impossible to ignore. From one end of the carpet wrapping the body, a bracelet with pink beads and a small silver heart was hanging. A personal accessory. Something too human to be part of a staged scene. That person was real. Someone with a name, with a family. My stomach twisted. I ran to check the folder where I had saved the original files, but they were gone. Not in the trash and not in any backup. They had simply vanished. I knew I hadn't deleted them. I checked system logs, remote activity, even the antivirus. Nothing. No alerts. No traces. If someone had deleted those files, they had done it with knowledge and precision. And if they could erase my data without leaving a mark, they could still be inside my computer. I unplugged the network cable, turned off Wi-Fi, and sat in silence. Felix, my cat, paced nervously around the room, staring toward the window as if he sensed something I couldn't see. Every creak in the building sounded like footsteps. Every slammed door outside made me jump. That afternoon, I drove to a coffee shop where I used to work, just to connect from somewhere else, surrounded by people. I opened my laptop and tried to find any trace of the posting on Iron Packet. The thread was gone, not deleted or archived, but wiped completely, as if it had never been there. I searched for the username. Nothing. Not in search engines, not in saved copies on the Wayback Machine. It was as if the job had never been posted. And that was the most terrifying part. This wasn't some random client or shady gig. Someone had chosen me specifically. They had used me. And now they were covering their tracks. 2 days later, while I was showering, someone slid an unmarked envelope under my door. There were no knocks, no footsteps, no sounds. I only found it afterward, lying on the floor. Inside was a USB drive and a small handwritten note. This is what happens to people who ask questions. Nothing else. No names, no symbols. I didn't even try to plug it in. I put it in my pocket, walked 3 blocks to an alley behind a tire shop, and crushed it with a brick until it was in pieces. Then I went into the store next door, bought a burner phone, and spent the rest of the day formatting my computer and reinstalling everything from scratch. Since then, I stopped freelancing. I got a steady job at a design agency where I could be around people in a well-lit place where nothing felt so empty. Sometimes I still think about that video, about the bracelet, about who that woman was, whether her family ever got answers, or whether the footage I edited was used to hide something, to throw the investigation off track. And I can't stop wondering, was there another version of the video, edited after mine? Or maybe I was the one who, without knowing it, erased the proof they needed? I'll never know. And that's what eats at me the most. I've told the story to a few close friends, always adding that maybe I was just a paranoid designer who got involved in something I shouldn't have. But when I remember how the files disappeared, the client's silence, and that USB, I know it wasn't a coincidence. Someone made sure I played my part, and they also made sure I kept quiet. So yes, maybe this can serve as a warning to you. Don't accept jobs from anonymous clients on forums that vanish overnight, especially if they ask you to blur faces from something that looks far too real to be fiction. Story 3. I was 19 when this happened. I was visiting my aunt and uncle's house in upstate New York during spring break. I had just started my second semester of college and wanted to get ahead on some reading for my psychology class, and also escape the noise of the city for a bit. They lived in one of those old houses that creak for no reason, with unstable internet and spotty cell service. So I wasn't expecting to get much done. My cousin Ethan, who had just turned 17, spent most of his time locked in his room, playing video games or editing weird videos. Since I hadn't brought my computer, he lent me his old one. He warned me it was slow, but that it would work for writing. I should have brought a notebook and done it the old-fashioned way. The laptop was a mess. Half-peeled stickers, missing keys, the screen covered in smudges. But it turned on, and that was enough. I'd spent about 20 minutes highlighting a boring article about human behavior when I got bored and started poking around in the desktop files. There were folders called memes, do not open, MP4, lol, and one that caught my attention, archive streams. I figured they were old Twitch recordings or something unimportant, but when I opened it, I found only one HTML file, titled with a string of numbers. That same day's date. That seemed so strange that I clicked it. The screen went black for a few seconds and then a video started playing. It looked like a live stream, like a home security camera feed, with terrible quality, pixelated, with a red flicker off frame. It showed a man in his 30s tied to a metal chair in what looked like a concrete basement. His head was tilted down, his hands bound with plastic zip ties. The camera was fixed in a corner. I thought it was one of Ethan's horror projects, maybe a fictional series or an alternate reality game. The man looked sweaty, terrified, but I assumed he was acting. Until I noticed two things that turned my stomach. The first, in the bottom corner of the video, the footage clock showed the exact date and time of that moment. I confirmed it with my phone. It was real time. The second, behind the man, on the wall, there was a whiteboard. In red marker, written in a rushed hand, there was a long sequence of numbers. It took me a few seconds to understand what it was. An IP address. My IP address. I knew because that morning I'd looked it up while trying to fix the house Wi-Fi. It was mine, digit for digit. I froze. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe Ethan was messing with me. Or maybe it was a pre-recorded video and he'd added my IP for fun. But it didn't make sense. He didn't know I'd be using his laptop, or that I'd opened that specific folder. And the video didn't show any signs of editing. It was a continuous, real-time transmission. The man in the chair kept looking towards something off camera, tensing his body, as if he was afraid someone would come back. I tried to close the tab, but it wouldn't close. It would only minimize and then reopen on its own in a new window. I tried closing the browser. Nothing. I even pressed Control-Alt-Delete, but the computer didn't respond. Suddenly, the speakers let out a high-pitched screech, a static burst that made me flinch, and underneath that noise, I swear I heard whispers, dozens of voices talking at once in a language I didn't recognize. My hands were sweating. I unplugged the charger, slammed the laptop shut, and stayed still, my heart pounding in my chest. but I couldn't live with the doubt. I had to know what the hell I'd seen. I went to Ethan's room and knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked harder. From inside I could hear loud music. Metal, probably. I cracked the door open. He was there with his headphones on, completely focused on his game. I asked if he was messing with me. He pulled one ear cup off, looked at me confused, and said in that teenager tone, "What are you talking about?" I mentioned the archive streams folder. He frowned, thinking, and replied, "I don't remember making it. Maybe one of my friends did." He seemed sincere. I didn't want to push it. I said something about my studying and went back downstairs. When I opened the laptop again, ignoring every sign of common sense, the stream was still active. The same basement, the same man. Except this time the camera was closer. The angle had changed. It was impossible for it to have done that by itself, which meant someone had moved it. The man was now staring straight into the lens. His lips trembled, like he was trying to say something, but couldn't. And then I realized he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. I leaned in without thinking, trying to understand what he was saying with his eyes. There was something behind that gaze, a silent plea, a desperation so human it made my stomach churn. It was as if he knew I was watching him, as if he needed me to do something. And that was the most disturbing part. Not the blood on his lip, not the bruises on his wrists, but the certainty that it wasn't a coincidence, that I had been chosen to see it. My chest tightened. I looked back at the screen, and beneath the video a blinking line of red text appeared. Viewer 12 connected. I had no idea what that meant. Were there other people watching this? I looked for a chat, a button, anything I could interact with. Nothing. Just the video, the timestamp, the viewer count, and that damn IP address on the whiteboard like a signature. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, no signal. I tried my aunt and uncle's landline, dead. It didn't make sense. The rotor was still on, the lights blinking like always. I could hear Ethan upstairs, yelling into his mic while playing online, completely connected. But for me, everything was dead. I went back to the laptop, desperate. I tried typing another address into the browser. YouTube, Google, anything. Every attempt took me back to the same page, like there was no way out. The video froze for a second, then started playing again. But the man was gone. Only the empty chair, the loose straps, and a dark trail leading off frame. Blood? Water? I couldn't tell. I leaned closer to look. That's when I saw it. The whiteboard had been erased. And in its place, now written in large red letters, hurried, shaky, was, "Don't look away." I read it out loud, almost whispering, "What the hell is this?" But I couldn't stop watching. The video kept showing the same basement, empty, still, with that blinking red light barely illuminating the background. The longer I stared, the more I felt like something was staring back at me, as if it wasn't a broadcast, but a two-way mirror. And then a silhouette moved slowly across the back of the image. No face, no clear shape, just a shadow sliding through, as if it was waiting for something. I slammed the laptop shut. This time I didn't even unplug it. I grabbed my things and walked straight out the front door. I didn't say anything to Ethan or my aunt and uncle. I walked a few blocks to a gas station, just to be around people, to get phone signal. And when I finally had it, I looked up my IP address. The result made me go cold. A residential network in the same neighborhood where my aunt and uncle lived. It was impossible. I searched forums, subreddits, any reference to something similar. Nothing. Every attempt to return to the link led to an empty, archived page with no content. When I came back an hour later, Ethan was still playing. The laptop was closed, asleep, as if nothing had happened. I asked him one last time about the folder. He looked genuinely confused. He offered to format the drive. He said it was probably a virus. I told him yes. But even after the folder disappeared, the feeling of being watched stayed there. Not like in horror movies, but in small details. The reflection of light in a webcam that isn't even on. The sound of static when no device is powered. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the whiteboard, the phrase, "Don't look away." I started wondering if it was a warning for him, or for me. If I looked away, what would happen? Was it worse to watch, or to stop watching? For days I couldn't use the screen without feeling sick. I taped over my laptop camera, unplugged my smart assistant, put my phone in a drawer before sleeping. It might sound paranoid, but once you feel like a screen has looked back at you, you never look at another one the same way. Almost a year has passed. Nothing else has happened. Ethan sold the laptop for parts, but every now and then, late at night, I open my browser and feel that tension crawling up my spine, like something invisible is trying to drag me back to that place. I don't know if what I saw was real or some kind of digital trap, but there's something I'll never forget. The look on that man's face, pleading, cutting through the screen, as if I were his last chance. And that phrase, "Don't look away." Story 4. I'm not the kind of person who usually talks about these things on the internet. I work in the tech sector, I do my thing, and I avoid drawing attention. But something happened to me 2 years ago, and I still can't make sense of it. Sometimes I still wake up soaked in sweat, with a phantom pain in the hand I no longer like to look at. Back then I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, working as a remote contractor while investing in cryptocurrencies in my free time. I wasn't rich, but I knew how to manage my money. Or so I thought. Too smart to get scammed, I believed, until it happened. It was around April when I started getting involved in gray market deals on a site that imitated the old Silk Road, one of those hidden services on the Tor browser, full of people who call themselves vendors, like they're in some damn farmer's market. I was looking for a rare security vulnerability, not to do anything illegal, but to test a client's infrastructure. The vendor called themselves Null Forge. Their profile looked legitimate. Hundreds of reviews, all positive. Promises of delivery within 72 hours. I paid in Bitcoin, around $1,300. Then, silence. 3 days turned into 5, 5 into 8. Nothing. They had completely ignored me. Like the stubborn idiot I am, I posted a thread on a cybersecurity forum warning about the scam. I described the fraud in detail, the dates, and I even shared their digital wallet address. The post got attention. Other users replied saying they had also been scammed by Null Forge. I thought that, at least, I'd helped someone avoid the trap. And I went on with my life, until a week later. It was Friday night. I got off work late, around 9 p.m., and took my usual route back to my apartment, a quiet street near West 7th. I remember stopping at the corner store to buy a drink and texting my friend Drew. In 30, I'll hop on to play Call of Duty. That's the last clear memory I have. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of what looked like a basement or a warehouse. The floor was cold concrete, the ceiling low, and the fluorescent lights flickered. My head hurt like I'd been hit. My wrists were secured with plastic zip ties, and the floor around me was stained with blood. A lot of blood. My left hand was burning, like I'd plunged it into acid. I looked down, and I started screaming. 2 fingers were missing. The ring finger and the pinky, cut clean off, like with an industrial tool. I couldn't process it. My mouth was taped shut, my ankles tied. I started kicking, crying, breathing through my nose in desperation. Panic hit me so hard I almost passed out again. I don't know how long I was there. Hours, days. It felt endless. There were no windows or clocks. Just the constant buzz of the light and the sharp smell of something chemical. Bleach, blood, or both. I drifted in and out of consciousness, maybe from blood loss or shock. Sometimes I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, like the person who took me wanted me to know they were still there. Once I even heard a whistle, a clumsy melody, out of tune, like someone trying to remember a forgotten song. I never saw a face, not a voice, only the sound. And then, at some point, maybe 2 days later, maybe 3, they abandoned me. I woke up outside, dumped next to a loading dock in an industrial area, nearly unconscious, wrapped in a blue moving blanket, like a broken appliance. A truck driver found me. He called 911. I remember the paramedics trying to keep me awake. One of them said something about shock trauma and a clean amputation. Then, at the hospital, the police asked me 1,000 questions. Whether I'd been in contact with dangerous people, whether I owed money, whether I had enemies. I told them everything. The purchase on the dark web, the scam, the post I had made. They took notes, but it was obvious they didn't fully understand. One of them even asked me, "You mean hackers?" The following weeks were a blur. Physical therapy, psychological evaluations, and nightmares, the kind that make you afraid to close your eyes. My hand healed, at least physically, but mentally, that part never went back to normal. I became paranoid. I moved apartments, changed my phone, my number, my email address. I closed all my accounts, left every forum I'd participated in. I even sold most of my cryptocurrency. I didn't trust anything digital anymore. Every time I turned on a screen, I thought, what if they're watching me? What if I touched something I shouldn't have? What if this was bigger than a simple scammer with a bruised ego? 5 months later, when I was finally starting to feel a little safe, I received a padded envelope. It had no return address, just my address written by hand. Inside was a note, a single line written in black ink. We protect our own. Consider the debt settled. And along with it, a USB drive. I plugged it in with fear, expecting the worst. But it didn't contain any virus or hidden files, just a cold crypto wallet, freshly generated. Inside it, the exact amount of Bitcoin I had lost, plus a little extra, like a tip. My first reaction was to throw everything away, pretend I'd never seen it. But I didn't. I still have that USB. Sometimes I check the balance. It's always the same. Not one Satoshi more, not one less. I kept the envelope in a locked drawer for weeks before touching it again. I went over the timeline again and again, trying to make sense of it. Who were they? Some kind of clandestine group that punishes scammers? Or was it Null Forge themselves, returning the money in a twisted way, like this had all been some kind of sick justice? The note gave no answers. and the police didn't find a single fingerprint on the package. I showed them everything, hoping that, at the very least, it would give me closure. But one of the officers only said, "That kind of people don't usually leave tips." That sentence haunted me, and then I remembered something that had happened before the kidnapping. The signs. A week before, the building buzzer rang twice in the middle of the night. When I went down to check, there was no one. A few days later, I found my mailbox open, even though I swear I'd closed it. And one afternoon, I came home and found my cat locked in the bathroom, a door I never close when I leave. Small things. Small, but enough to break your sense of safety until something finally cracks. I started thinking that the post I made had angered the wrong people. Not simple scammers, but enforcers. The ones who enforce the rules of their world. I never went back into the deep web. I barely use anything beyond online banking. People on the internet talk a lot about reporting scams, about exposing criminals. But I learned, in the most brutal way, that not all criminals are chaotic or clumsy. Some have structure, hierarchies, rules. And when you interfere, even if you're right, someone, somewhere, may decide you need a lesson. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. So yeah, that's my story. I still type crooked because of the fingers I don't have, and fluorescent lights make me nauseous. I never found out who it was. I probably never will. But I know one thing. They used me to send a message. And when they were done, they gave me the money back, as if I were a transaction, a bookkeeping error that needed to be corrected. That's what torments me the most, because maybe, in their world, that was an act of mercy. Story 5. It was 2019. I was 21 years old and living in a small off-campus apartment on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona. I was in that post-high school phase where you're only half functioning, surviving on cheap beer, late nights on YouTube, and just enough classes to avoid getting kicked out of college. That week I had been experimenting with LSD for the first time. It's not something I'm proud of, but at the time I was bored and curious. It was Friday night. I took a dose around 8, and by 10, I was melting into my mattress while browsing the darkest corners of the internet. Corners I honestly never should have entered. Around the third hour of the trip, I ended up on a strange site linked from a forum with a title something like, "You won't believe what's real down here." The page looked like a joke, a parody of old Hitman for Hire services, but mixed with memes. There were pixelated images of cats holding rifles and drop-down menus with absurd options like preferred method, piano wire, or banana peel. I was so high I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. My judgment, of course, was completely absent. So, for fun, I filled out the form. Name, mine. Address, mine. Target, myself. Reason, because I'm an idiot. I hit submit and laughed until I fell asleep, convinced I'd made the cleverest joke on the planet. When I woke up the next morning, I felt like any other day after a psychedelic trip. Tired, disoriented, and with the room smelling like ramen and cheap incense. The laptop was still on until it died from the battery. I didn't think anything of the form. I assumed it was simple satire, like those prank pages that let you rent a snake as a joke. But 3 days later, a package arrived at my door. No return address, just a brown box with my name scrawled on it in black marker. I assumed it was something I'd ordered and forgotten about, so I opened it without thinking, while eating a Pop-Tart. Inside there was nothing but a cheap burner phone and nothing else. No instructions, no packaging. The screen was already on. A message blinked at the top. New image received. I felt a stab in my stomach, like my body understood the danger before my mind did. I tapped the screen, and I froze. It was a photo of me. Me sitting on my bed, staring blankly, my face half lit by the laptop screen. Exactly 3 nights earlier. The same t-shirt, the same posture. The image taken from the angle of my webcam. At first, I just stared at it, trying to convince myself it was a prank. But the timestamp matched the exact time I filled out that form. A slow, suffocating chill crept up my neck. I turned toward my laptop, still sitting on the desk. The little green camera light. Had it turned on that night? I couldn't remember. My hands were shaking. I ripped off a piece of tape from a food container and slapped it over the camera. Stupid. I know. But I needed to feel less exposed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the site collected data. Maybe it was just a screenshot. But it wasn't. The image had depth. Real shadows. It wasn't a screen. It was a photo taken from outside. I picked up the phone again with trembling hands. And in that instant, a new message appeared. Never joke about contracts. That was when I truly felt fear. It wasn't a warning or a prank anymore. Someone had seen me, knew who I was, where I lived, what I looked like that night. It was like I'd signed something without understanding it, like I'd invited someone in. I didn't call the police. I should have. I know. But how do you explain something like that? Officer, I filled out a hitman form on a meme website while I was high, and now they're mailing me photos of myself. They would have laughed, or worse, they would have asked to see my browsing history. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off all my devices, put the phone in a shoebox, and drove an hour and a half to Prescott, to my cousin Blake's house. I told him I was just staying for the weekend, but I barely slept. Every car that passed and every time the AC clicked on, I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. Blake could tell something was wrong. He asked if I owed money or if I was in trouble. I said no, but my eyes probably told a different story. The second night I sat on the porch, chain smoking, staring at the trees across the street. I had that feeling that someone was there, just outside my sight. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The next morning I went back home. Not because I felt braver, but because I had classes, rent to pay, and a life to keep up. But deep down, I knew something had changed. My apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It was like someone had crossed an invisible line, like the air itself had been invaded. When I opened the door, everything was exactly the way it was when I left. The lights off, the blinds closed, absolute silence. I stood in the doorway for several seconds, unsure whether I should go in. I didn't know why, but the atmosphere was different, heavier, denser. I didn't touch the laptop. I didn't even look at the shoebox with the phone. I just walked around the living room like a caged animal, waiting for something to happen. And something did. Around 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. Just once. Ding. No knocking, no footsteps. Just that single, lonely sound. I froze on the couch, my heart beating so fast I thought I'd pass out. I didn't move for what felt like forever. When I finally worked up the courage, I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but right in the center of the door, taped in place, there was a yellow note, written in all caps with a black marker. Contract canceled. Be smart. That was it. No signature. No clue who had left it, or how they knew I was awake. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I shoved a few things into a backpack, got in my car, and left the city before the sun came up. I hid out at a friend's place in Tempe for 2 weeks. I told him I needed a break from my mental health. And while that was true, I didn't tell him the real reason. When I finally came back, I packed everything to move. I changed my number, deleted my accounts, formatted all my devices. I bought a new laptop and physically ripped out the webcam. Since then, I haven't gone near the deep web again. Not even as a joke. I never told the full story. Until now. Sometimes I still catch myself staring into the corners of rooms, or jumping at shadows that aren't there. Nothing else has happened since then. No package. No message. Just silence. As if whoever it was had already said what they needed to say. But sometimes, when night falls and the apartment is calm, I can't help thinking, how close were they, really? Did they ever come in while I was asleep? Or maybe the contract canceled was only temporary. And the most terrifying thing of all, I don't think I was the first person to do it. And I'm almost sure I won't be the last. Story 6. I'm not proud of what I did. But in 2019, I was going through a really difficult time. My name is Trevor. I was 32 years old and had just moved into a small apartment complex in Akron, Ohio, after a breakup and losing my job. Anxiety was consuming me. Without health insurance, going to a doctor wasn't even an option. I tried to handle it on my own, but the panic attacks kept getting worse. Episodes where my body would just shut down, unable to breathe or think clearly. That's when someone on a sketchy forum suggested I visit certain deep web markets to get medication. I wish I'd never taken that advice. The first time I tried to buy anything, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I found a vendor offering anxiety pills, exactly the ones I'd been prescribed years earlier. The listings looked surprisingly professional. Reviews, ratings, encrypted messaging system. Against all common sense, I placed a small order. A week later, and the package arrived in my mailbox, discreet, tightly sealed. No issues. I took a pill and, for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I convinced myself it would only be for a while, until I got back on my feet. But you know how those things go. They never stop at just once. I made 2 more orders over the following months, both without problems. The vendor, who called themselves Red Nerve Rex, even started messaging me directly. At first, they were simple messages. Did your package arrive on time? Let me know if you need another shipment. But one day, the tone changed. I got a message that said, "You've been selected for VIP access, faster deliveries, exclusive products, no customs interference." It sounded ridiculous, but the timing was strange. I was about to run out of pills, and the offer arrived right then, as if they knew. I replied with a simple sure, without thinking too much. They answered, "Your VIP shipment will arrive in 48 hours. 2 days later, I found a padded envelope in my mailbox. The same sender as always, the same careful packaging. But when I opened it in the kitchen, there were no pills, only a sheet of paper folded with precision. I felt a chill in my stomach before I even read it. The message said, "Now we know where you live. You owe us for the trust." That was it. Nothing else. I just stood there, frozen, the paper trembling in my hands. Was it a joke? A warning? Blackmail? I didn't know, but something inside me told me they weren't playing. I spent the rest of the day in a state of total alert. Every sound outside made me jump. I looked through the peephole over and over, watching my neighbors like they were strangers. I put tape over my laptop camera and turned off my phone. That night I didn't sleep. I left the hallway light on and sat on the edge of the bed listening, waiting. The worst part was not understanding the phrase, "You owe us for the trust." Did they want money? Silence? Something else? I didn't reply to the message. I didn't place any more orders. I just wanted everything to disappear. But 3 days later, something else happened. I was coming back from the grocery store when I saw my landlord, Mr. Weaver, standing in front of the building's electrical room near the stairwell. He was an older man in his 60s, always wearing a Cleveland Browns cap and chewing mints. He greeted me and asked, "You haven't seen anyone messing with the generator room, have you?" I told him no, and asked why. He said someone had tried to force the lock on the main panel that morning. It had scratches, like someone had tried to pry it open with a tool. He thought it was kids messing around or maybe a tenant trying to steal electricity. I didn't say anything, but my stomach dropped. That door is next to the side entrance, an area people rarely use. Only someone who knew the building well would even know it existed. I thought back to the note. "Now we know where you live." It wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Proof that someone had studied the place, knew exactly where to strike if they wanted to hurt me. That night I checked the deadbolt twice and shoved a chair under the handle. Like that would help. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? "Hi, I bought illegal medication on the dark web and now someone is stalking me." They'd think I was crazy. And in the end, I had no proof. Just that cursed piece of paper. I convinced myself it was a sick prank. Until the next night. That night, around 3:40 a.m., I woke up to a sharp sound. A loud pop, like an electrical snap. The kind of noise that yanks you awake instantly. The room was completely dark. I checked my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing. The whole building had no power. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. A blackout. A blown transformer. Anything logical. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I lit a candle and walked through the apartment. Every creak of the floor sounding like thunder. The silence was so thick my ears hurt. No TVs, no footsteps, not even the building's pipes. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was drowned in darkness, but something moved. A shadow, a figure sliding slowly between the far ends of the corridor. Just a glimpse, but enough to freeze my blood. I backed away and latched the lock again. I sat in the living room with the baseball bat I kept under my bed, staring at the door without blinking. I didn't sleep for even a second. When morning came, the light snapped back on. No warning, no sounds of repairs outside, no trucks, no technicians. Everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. I called the management office and they said they knew about the outage, but they had no details. The power company hadn't logged any outage in the area. Mr. Weaver, the landlord, just shrugged and said, "Happens sometimes." But I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe it either. That same week I broke my lease. I paid the penalty, packed everything in one night, and left before dawn. I didn't look back. I never logged into that market again. I threw my laptop in the trash and bought another one with cash. I changed my number, forwarded my mail to a P.O. box, and vanished from the digital map. Yeah, that sounds extreme. But after that night, I understood it wasn't worth the risk. If they'd been able to get into the control room without being seen, what else could they do? What if I hadn't woken up? What if the power never came back? 4 years have passed. I live in another state, with another job and another life. Nothing strange has happened again, but sometimes I think about that note. You owe us for the trust. I don't think it was about money anymore. It was something deeper. It was control. A way of reminding me that the moment I clicked on confirm purchase, I invited them in. I opened the door, and they simply walked through it. If you're reading this and you're thinking about doing something similar, don't. It doesn't matter how desperate you are, or what you think you're going to get, because once they know where you live, it's already too late. Story 7. I'm not proud of this, and I've never told it in full before. I'm sharing it now because it still haunts me. And, to be honest, I don't know what to do with the guilt anymore. It was 2019. I had just dropped out of college. I was 21 and living in a filthy 2-bedroom apartment in Dayton, Ohio, sleeping on a stained couch that smelled like weed and old sweat. My roommate, Chase, was as lost as I was. No job and no direction, almost always high. We used to joke that at least when we hit rock bottom, at least we'll have touched something. And that's when the job showed up. It came through a friend of a friend. One of those shady chats where people share jobs that don't ask questions. They just pay well. At first, I didn't think much of it. I'd already done stupid things for money before. Delivering packages without knowing what was inside. Selling fake essays. Whatever. But this one was different. The message said simply, remote assistant wanted. Reposting tasks. Deep web access required. Instant payment in Bitcoin. That last part is what hooked me. The guy who recommended it, Nick, swore he'd already made a few thousand. You just post what they send you, he told me. You don't even need to read it. It's nerd garbage for weirdos. At the time, I was desperate. No car, no savings, and a phone so broken it left splinters in my fingers. So I emailed the address he gave me. The reply came the next morning. A welcome message, instructions to access a specific deep web forum through Tor, and a Bitcoin wallet preloaded with $200 just for joining. It was more money than I'd seen in weeks. My job was simple. Repost ads on different forums, download files they sent, and keep a record in a spreadsheet. Everything was encrypted. Onion links, password-protected .7z files, folders with random names. I didn't open anything. I didn't want to know. I kept telling myself it was probably some underground marketing company, or something illegal but not necessarily malicious. And at first, it was easy. I'd wake up, open the laptop, follow the instructions exactly, and within minutes, the payment would hit. I started making real money. Hundreds of dollars a week. Enough to buy food without checking my balance first. I even bought a used car off Craigslist and moved out on my own into a small studio. My employer's messages were always polite, impersonal, almost like I was talking to a bot. They called themselves Dorian. They never used a real name. And honestly, I didn't care. As long as the money kept coming, I wouldn't ask questions. And that was my biggest mistake. As the months passed, the tasks started to change. They weren't just simple reposts anymore. Now I had to do them at exact times, rename files before uploading them, or post them in threads with specific titles. Once, Darian asked me to upload a folder to a forum I'd never visited before. Inside a thread titled B3 Remnant. The thread was filled with indecipherable messages, strings of symbols, usernames that looked like codes. Still, I didn't think too hard about it. I convinced myself it was some network of paranoid people hiding their information from competitors or the government. I was just following instructions, and the money kept coming. $200 a week. Steady. But the uneasy moments started. Once, I accidentally opened a folder before uploading it. Inside were hundreds of files with numbers and dates. No text, no images, just data sequences. But there was something about it, a coldness that's hard to explain. Another time, out of curiosity, I went into a forum I wasn't supposed to, and there I saw my own posts, duplicated. The same titles, the same links, but from other accounts, as if my tasks were just one small piece inside something much bigger and much darker. One night, joking around, I wrote to Darian, "Hey, this isn't illegal, right?" Their reply came 10 minutes later. "Stick to your tasks and don't be curious. You're doing well." Cold, sharp, nothing like their usual tone. I didn't ask again, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the file, the duplicates, the codes, that paranoid feeling, but inverted. It wasn't that I was being watched. I was helping someone watch. And for the first time, I didn't feel in control anymore. Still, I didn't quit. The money was too good, and somehow I convinced myself that if I didn't look too closely, nothing bad would happen. I kept posting. I kept obeying. I stopped asking questions. I stopped thinking. For a while, everything went back to normal. No strange folders, no weird instructions, just routine tasks. Until one morning in January 2020, I heard knocking at the door. It wasn't casual knocking. It was precise, firm, rhythmic. 3 knocks, spaced out. I looked through the peephole and went cold. 2 men in plain clothes. One of them showed a badge. "FBI, we need to talk to you." I opened the door with my legs trembling. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They were too calm, and that was worse. One introduced himself as Agent McDana. The other barely spoke. They asked to come in. I just nodded. What came next felt like watching my life in third person. Them sitting across from me, asking questions in a steady, almost friendly tone. "Do you recognize this email address? Did you use this IP address on this date? Have you accessed the following forums?" I could barely speak. My mouth was dry, my hands cold. Then I asked, "What is this about?" Agent McDana paused. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, calmly but firmly, "One of the files you reposted contained material linked to a known child exploitation network." It felt like the world collapsed. I wanted to throw up. I started stammering that I hadn't opened anything, that I didn't know what I was sharing, that I was just following instructions. They already knew. They explained I wasn't the target of the investigation, that I was what they called a digital mule, someone who moves data so the origin disappears into the noise. They didn't arrest me, but they took my laptop. They said they would be in touch. That was 3 years ago. They never contacted me again. But one sentence burned itself into me like a brand. "Your IP is permanently tied to this case." That line follows me. It's like an invisible stain. A scar you can't see, but it never fades. After that, I fell apart completely. I moved back in with my mom, in Akron. I erased my entire online presence. I left the digital world completely. I sold my crypto, deleted my accounts. I even changed my legal name 2 years later, because no one would hire me. Every background check ended the same way. Silence. They vanished. And I understood. When people hear the words FBI, child exploitation, digital trail, there's no way to clean that. Even if you're innocent, even if you never knew, nobody wants to hear the rest. And honestly, I don't blame them. Sometimes I still have nightmares. I see folders full of meaningless names and wake up drenched in sweat, like those lines of data are toxic. I dream of emails written in neutral language, so polished it feels threatening. And every time someone knocks on my door, my stomach twists. I know I wasn't the only one who fell for easy money, but maybe I was one of the few who made it out alive and free. I never found out who Darian really was. Their email disappeared, their posts were deleted, every trace vanished. And I'm still living with the weight of having been part, without wanting to be, of something disgusting, monstrous, of carrying data I never should have touched. And even though I didn't do it on purpose, even though I was just one more piece, nothing can undo it.